And you're very welcome to the first part of the Clare Champions General Election digital preview with Clare Champion Editor Peter O'Connell. I'm joined here by reporters Owen Ryan and Fiona McGarry, who will steer us through what has been happening in Clare since the election was called on January 14th. Fiona, 15 candidates, 4 independents, 3 Fine Gael, 3 Fianna Fáil, and then one each from the Greens, Sinn Féin, People Before Profit, Irish Freedom Party and Renew. So quite a list.
It's great to see the diversity. I think that's really interesting. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil both tabling or both putting forward 3 candidates. Both of them are very, I think bullish was the word that you all used, Owen, during the week in terms of one of the Fine Gael candidates. They're saying that they've got very strong tickets, but I think it's very interesting to see People Before Profit coming into the race in Clare for the very first time. The Irish Freedom Party as well, we hadn't heard much about them. I don't think anybody had predicted that they would be fielding a candidate in Clare. I think it's really interesting. We see a broad spectrum. I had a chat with Michael Leahy of the Freedom Party during the week, who would have seen himself going forward to offer a conservative voice. Then on the other end of the spectrum, People Before Profit, I know, Owen, you were speaking with Teresa O'Donoghue, their candidate, who would be identifying themselves as to the left of the political spectrum. I think, Peter, that's very interesting that we see strong tickets from the traditional parties, but we also see the more conservative right voice entering into politics in Clare, and also the left for the first time too.
The Michael Harty's votes on, I mean, there's been a lot of talk as to where they're going to go.
Yeah, I think that's the key to the election, really, isn't it? Where will they go? Because obviously there's one seat in play now, and Michael Harty, he picked up 8,629 first preferences in 2016. That's a lot of votes, and those are people who potentially won't vote for either Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, which is really the old firm in Clare, and they're still probably going to get at least 3 out of the 4 seats, if not 4. They'll probably get 3 anyway. But I think those votes are very much in play now, and they'll be really crucial to that last seat. Will they go to an independent again, or someone left field, say like Roisin Garvey or Michael McNamara, or will a lot of them migrate back to one of the big parties?
Just mentioned Michael McNamara, Fiona. Dan Danner had a story in the paper this week, a voting pact between himself and Joe Wolfe. I mean, will that prove in any way significant, do you think?
I think it is very significant. It's very interesting to see the 2 independents teaming up, even if it is at an informal level. Obviously, both of them are from a farming background, so the farming vote is going to be incredibly important in terms of getting one of them at least over the line. I think it's very significant because we discussed this before we came on air, but who will go out first, and will their transfers push one of the candidates over the line? It's very interesting.
Well, I think it's much more likely that McNamara would stay in the race longer, and that could give him an important boost.
Yeah.
Certainly the beef plan, I think, has been a really interesting development over the last year, and the unity seen between the farmers. Now, I mean, will most of those guys who are out protesting Tír McLean, will they vote for Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael in the end? Anyway, it'll be interesting to see, but certainly that's good news from Michael McNamara, and I think he's done himself no harm in his association with beef plan.
And do you think
his chances of winning a seat?
Do you think that the farmers will play an important role in terms of where their vote goes in Clare? Obviously,
they have to. I mean, there are a lot of farmers in Clare. Like, I mean, we all know loads of farmers, any of us from a rural area, and there's an awful lot of political awareness among farmers.
And I think rural issues really, continue to dominate in terms of the issues coming up on the doorstep. We're hearing about health, housing, but an awful lot of people are talking about not just, I suppose, the agricultural issues, but the state of rural Ireland in general.
I think it's very interesting because the economy is so much stronger than it was in 2016 and certainly in 2011. It's a lot stronger, but there is an awful lot of dissatisfaction. I mean, we have near full employment now, but there is an awful lot of dissatisfaction and a feeling that the west of Ireland and Clare has been left behind.
But are we talking
speed recovery?
Are we talking in a bit of a vacuum, Fiona, in terms of Clare, in terms of rural Ireland? Like, we're maybe interested in obviously issues that pertain to rural Ireland, but maybe that doesn't get quite the same play the further east you go?
I don't think it does, and an awful lot of commentators remarked on the fact that the first of the leaders' debates on Virgin Media One between Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar, that rural issues didn't really come up as a discussion point. I think a lot of people were disappointed at that. I think the parties are releasing their manifestos today, the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and I do believe, I think according to some of the front pages this morning, there's going to be kind of a bit of a sweetener for rural Ireland in terms of repopulation and regeneration. Regeneration of rural towns, it's a massive issue here. Lots of people very unhappy. You know, we talk about the housing crisis, which is a phenomenon in Clare. People see houses in villages, but those houses are very often empty and derelict, and then there are other people who can't get on the property ladder. So those kind of the issue of housing, it's massive on the East Coast, it's massive in rural Ireland, but it presents itself in a different format, and it is tied into the rural regeneration issue. But I think you're right, Peter, the east of the country, they're experiencing it in a different way, and an awful lot of our political leadership, you know, I think does gravitate towards issues more related to the capital in the east.
Just a few weeks ago, my partner and myself walked around the middle of Kilrush, and it was amazing to see the amount of vacant properties there, and the ones that have declined quite a lot.
Yeah. And a lot of them are very fine properties, you know, and would
they
have
could
been
be with a little bit
very
of work.
impressive
And
structures.
Michael Harty was quite vocal about this. He had a plan for regenerating village centres and town centres with, you know, people in emergency accommodation in other parts of the country would be given the option to take up a house in declining areas where there has been depopulation. But
And
for one different reason or another, it never happened. Was there any? He didn't feel there was a whole lot of interest from the government.
Is that a factor, do you think, when outgoing TDs knock on the doors in a town like Kilrush? Because that issue...
It is this time, I'd say. That's what they're going to hear flat out.
But that issue has been, it's not just an issue in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, for several years, Kilrush has been in the top one or two, the top in Munster in terms of vacant commercial properties.
Yeah, but
and I think second nationwide.
But say in 2016, the economy was just recovering, and we all remember the famous slogan, "Keep the recovery going," and people felt it was very premature. Then 2011, the economy was even worse, but now I think there's a feeling that other areas have recovered and things can be done, like if there's the will to, you know, to put in a bit of effort into rural Ireland. So I think the expectations are a bit different now. That's from my view anyway.
Yeah.
I've heard an awful lot about it, about people complaining about how well Dublin is doing compared to the west of Ireland. I've heard a lot of that, like in the last couple of months.
Yeah, the regional imbalance, I think, is a huge issue that angers people, and they see it also with the airports. You know, they see Dublin Airport going from strength to strength, and then they're raising questions about our own facility in
It's taken virtually all new traffic
Yeah.
into Ireland, and there is a need for that to be changed. I mean, there's a link between passenger numbers and growth. And we've had policies that, you know, encourage development in rural areas in the past, and I think people are certainly going to expect our TDs to be pushing that now. Whoever's elected, whatever form men or women are elected for Clare, they're going to be under a little bit of pressure to deliver something for the county.
On a hyper local note, on Ballinruan, just talk to us a bit about Ballinruan.
Yeah, there was a lot of anger there last weekend and early this week, because they found out that the polling station in the Ballinruan Community Hall wasn't going to open, and people felt that it was a fine facility. There was access for people with disabilities. There was everything that was required, and they were very put out. They said they had no notification, and no one had spoken to them to say, you know, would you do this to make it okay for voting, or would you take any measures? And a bit like what we were talking about, they said it was rural areas being left behind again.
Yes.
But in fairness to the people there, they didn't take it lying down. They were active straight away. They were onto their political representatives. A lot of them said that they weren't going to vote as a protest, which I suppose is never good news for politicians. If you think you can get a few votes, you're going to want them.
So suddenly it became very political.
Well, very political, very fast. And they had planned a protest on the night of the election in the hall there, which would have been kind of a show of community strength and the protest. But thankfully, there was a reversal, and they will get to vote in their local area, you know. And
Fiona, not too far from Ballinruan, Clooney, bit of a unfortunate incident in Clooney on Thursday night.
That's right, and Timmy Dooley was tweeting about this because one of his core campaign team members, Councillor Pat Hayes, had his Jeep actually stolen while they were out on the canvas, and you can imagine the shock of returning to a very rural area, presumably after the hours of darkness, and finding that your car is gone, your Jeep's gone, and there's an alert out. Was seen leaving in the Tulla direction, or speeding away in the Tulla direction is how the tweet described it, but certainly not not a pleasant experience. Obviously, the importance of having a car to canvass a rural area, to canvass any part of Clare, but particularly towards the north and the east of the county is essential. Strange development, and we hope that there's a satisfactory resolution there.
Yeah. Of all the things you might expect to happen on a canvas,
you really don't.
You wouldn't expect your car to be stolen in a...
Timmy Dooley told me he was bitten by a dog on the canvas. I was asking him, about unusual incidents, bitten by a small dog and having to go off and get a tetanus shot, but expecting to have to come back and find your vehicle's gone.
Yeah, you kind of expect the odd dog attack, but
they're a major hazard of the
It's probably an occupational hazard for politicians. The dogs mightn't be as bad as some of the people. Some of the anger you're getting the doorsteps done, say you would be cleared from review. No matter what party you're in or what you've done, you'll probably get it.
Just looking at Sinn Féin, nationally they seem to be doing quite well, Fiona, in the polls, but the level of our organisation here in Clare...
Yeah, I think they were very slow to address the issue of the candidacy. Obviously, with the passing of the late Mike McKee and sincere sympathies still to his family, friends and to the party supporters. But a lot of people, I think, were expecting that the party would have fielded their candidate a lot sooner. Nolene Moran, her candidacy had been, I think, taken for granted, Owen, for quite a long time over the course of 2019.
Yeah,
we thought there was going to be a two-candidate strategy, and people made the assumption she might still be in contention.
Yeah, it would have seemed the logical thing, given that she was there already. But I think, obviously, we're very sympathetic to Mike's family and friends and to Ellie's associates in Sinn Féin. And I think his passing really left him without a chance of taking a seat in Clare. I think he would have been to hope, a two-time county councillor. He had a base and he had a lot of people who would canvass with him, and they had a bit of experience. And with Sinn Féin at around 20% in the polls, I mean, if they could even have got half of that number, they'd have put themselves in with a right good shot at taking a seat. Violet Ann Wynne now, I spoke to her earlier this week, but she thought could be today or even early next week by the time she really gets canvassing. And you would have to think it's virtually impossible to win a seat in those circumstances with such a limited canvass.
Yeah. We've got a fortnight left.
They haven't handled it very well, yeah.
And I mean, the fact that Nolene Moran spoke out,
she was obviously very unhappy
anger
with it, yeah. And you do get a lot of that in Sinn Féin, different parts of the country, don't you? Like members being unhappy with various things. I mean, I don't think she would have won a seat anyway. She would have finished close to the bottom of her electoral area in the last local elections. But yeah, I do see where she's coming from. I mean, whoever was selected is left with very little chance with such a short window to canvass.
Are we going to see Green Wave Part 2 in Clare? We saw it in the locals.
Yeah.
When Roisin Garvey got elected.
Yeah, I think Roisin Garvey is in with a very strong chance because of her affiliation to the Green Party. Now, her affiliation to the Green Party is very interesting because I did the interview with her in this room for her candidate profile. In the middle of the interview, she took a call from Eamon Ryan, and she admits that one of the things she said to Eamon is, take a little bit of a break, step back, Eamon, from the media and stop talking about the Cork to Limerick motorway, because she felt that this was coming up on the doors and it was very difficult for her. So she said, while she's a Green Party member, she's a very dedicated Green Party member, she was headhunted, but she says that she needs to go in and ruralise the Green Party. Those were the words that she used. So she believes the Green Party policies are changing. There is a green wave, and I do think it helped her to get across the line, but we have to remember her gene pool is Fiona Fáil, and that also helped her the last time out in 2019 in the Ennistimon local electoral area. I do think that's going to be a factor for her, because a lot of people are saying, and we've seen it in the national opinion polls, there is a bounce behind Fiona Fáil. I was speaking to Michael McTighe, the PRO in Clare, and he said that it's a lot easier to be out on the doors for Fiona Fáil this time around. So I think the Green Wave is going to help Roisin. I think the Fiona Fáil resurgence as well.
Yeah, can you imagine
it's going to help a couple of candidates,
for Fiona Fáil
and also
in
Michael
2011?
McNamara. Yeah, the wipeout.
That would have been,
the wipeout election, as it was called.
The country was in such a dire state. They must have got an awful lot of stick on the doors. It must be very different now for them. They're
telling us now on the grassroots, they're telling us that has changed around, and it's a more positive time for them. So I do think that will, the Fiona Fáil resurgence will help Roisin as well as the Green Wave.
If you look at Shannon, Owen, an area you know very well, does Shannon have a particular party that they'll back heavily? We're looking at Sinn Féin, or
no? Well, I think if Mike McKee had been there, he would have got a lot of. I mean, he'd 1,000 odd votes in the local elections. Obviously, he's not a candidate now. Cathal Crowe has been very successful in the Shannon electoral area, 2,500 number ones in the local elections. I think he's going to be very hard to stop. I think he's an excellent chance of winning a seat. That's a great base to be coming from. Other than that, though, it's hard now, isn't it? I think Cahill, though, is going to throughout the Shannon Municipal District and beyond, in fairness. He's been very active all over the county for a number of years now.
And he's got a lot of new territory that's coming into the constituency.
Back in South East area, which is going to help him too. So he does seem to be a front runner man with a chance of topping the poll, possibly, even some people feel.
The poster factor, Kyle Crowe, the night the election was called, I remember driving home and there was people out in Lissy Casey. It was quite...
in Kilrush, I think his posters were first up, so I was told.
And I can only speak now primarily about the Ennis-Kilrush Road. There's a lot of Kyle Crowe posters, a lot of Rita McInerney posters, so they seem to have been quite organised.
I think it's interesting that Michael McNamara would be seen as a candidate with a good chance, but I haven't seen any posters for him of him as of yet anyway.
One of the things that he did, which was interesting, was he was down outside Mass at I think it was the Friary last Sunday, kind of doing the old style. He was up on a platform on a podium and making his case with the microphone, which you haven't seen politicians doing. I think previously it's a very old school tactic. I'd love to know how that went down with the Mass scores.
Roisin Garvey has a lot of posters up too. She seems to have done quite a bit of canvassing.
What will be the biggest factor in terms of getting the message out, or do you have to do a bit of everything in terms of we'll call it traditional media, social media, and I suppose meeting people as well? That's probably how you can best impress somebody.
That's the mix, Peter, I think, and I think it's really, really important. And people will say to you that it's so important to go to the doors, to shake hands, and again, to go back to the canvassing, the canvas trail. I followed Timmy Dooley for a while this week, and he said it's almost better when you meet somebody on the doors who wasn't going to vote for you or was a little bit neutral, and you persuade them. And I think you can only do that with the face-to-face interaction. Social media obviously is just phenomenally important, and I suppose we've seen various levels of proficiency. The campaign video has really become a thing. I mean, almost all of the candidates now have, their 30 seconds or their 45-second piece to camera where they're talking about their issues. That's, I suppose, obviously for the younger generation, that's incredibly important, but I think it's as near as you're going to get to that face-to-face kind of handshake interaction.
It's interesting, isn't it? You can be campaigning very hard and doing a lot of things well and think your campaign is going well, and then your leader can come out with something like opposing the Cork Limerick motorway, or Lear Frederick's comments about the homeless man in Dublin, and just cuts you off at the knees. It really undermines everything you've been doing. Like, the national factors are important too. And
just on that, Fiona, and finally before we wrap it up, the debate between Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin. How did you watch it?
I watched some of it live, but I watched more of it back in clips, and it's really interesting because obviously for Leo Varadkar, I think his empathetic demeanour, his humility, lots of people have said that he was very humble and they felt that he won the debate on that factor. The question about drugs caught him out, and he was on the front page of the Irish Daily Mail yesterday, kind of an ultra close-up of his face as he was stumbling and pausing. A lot of people have suggested that maybe he didn't actually hear the question. I'm not sure that that's the case, but certainly I think lost major points on that score in the debate.
Yeah, I had read about that before I saw it. I was watching it last night, and I didn't think he handled it as badly as I had been led to believe.
As the papers.
But sometimes their reaction to things can be more significant than what actually happens. When people read that he performed terribly on that.
So much of it for television is obviously in the body language, somebody listening, and I heard an analyst talking about this, that when people hear a debate on radio, which is rare enough in these days, they have a different idea of who's won the debate, but a lot of it is to do with body language. And I think that cringe moment, it was a very long moment before he answered. I think a lot of people were holding their breath, not in a good way.
It did go on a bit. That's just about it from the first of the Clare Champions digital general election previews. Thanks indeed to Fiona McGarry, thanks to Owen Ryan. We'll be back next Friday with an update on what's been happening in the election. Don't forget our print general election supplement special is coming out in next week's edition of the Clare Champion, and we'll also have a roundtable digital special as well from Dan Danaher that will be published the week after next. And of course we're also going to be live streaming on Sunday, February 9th. It's going to be a long day at the Falls Hotel. Clare Champion in association with Clare County Council and LIT will be live streaming from early that morning and bringing you the count as it happens. But for now, for myself, Peter O'Connell, thanks a lot.